There are moments in the history of television when the screen itself seems to go quiet, not because the broadcast ends, but because something far larger has just shifted behind it. The sudden announcement that Sean Hannity, one of the most enduring, recognizable, and polarizing figures in modern broadcasting, is leaving Fox News, is one such moment. For over a quarter of a century, Hannity's voice wasn't just a fixture of primetime television, it was an echo chamber of American identity, politics, and persuasion. His departure isn't simply the end of a contract. It's the closing of a chapter that defined how millions consumed news, debated ideas, and found belonging in a divided landscape. But how did we arrive here? And what does this moment reveal, not only about one man or one network, but about the transformation of an entire media empire? 1. The voice that defined an era. From the late 1990s onward, Fox News built itself around personalities, not merely anchors, but archetypes. And among them, Sean Hannity stood as the network's iron constant. In an industry built on turnover and reinvention, he became the face of endurance. His brand was unmistakable, confident, confrontational, and direct, yet bound by a familiarity that felt, to his viewers, almost familial. For years, the rhythm of cable news revolved around his cadence, his framing, his nightly editorial lens. Hannity's presence represented something more than commentary. It was ritual. For many households, his hour became the nightly summation of national tension and moral clarity, an emotional debriefing of the day's chaos. When you turned on his show, you didn't just receive information, you entered a worldview. One that argued, reassured, and galvanized. So when news broke of his departure, the immediate question wasn't what happened, but what now? 2. A departure that echoes beyond television. In the modern media ecosystem, every departure of a major host ripples through multiple dimensions: cultural, political, and economic. But Hannity's exit feels different. It's not just about losing a ratings magnet. It's about the unraveling of a gravitational center. For decades, his name was synonymous with loyalty, to the network, to an ideology, and to a particular audience who saw in him not a performer, but a protector. Now, that equation has fractured. Fox News has weathered change before, hosts replaced, scandals weathered, reputations rebuilt. Yet this feels less like rotation and more like rupture, the symbolic end of the network's original identity as the voice of conservative television. Hannity was the last of that first generation still standing, the bridge between the early firebrand years and the algorithm-driven chaos of today's news cycle. His exit raises a deeper, more existential question: can a network outlive the personalities that built it? 3. The quiet strategy behind the headlines. Inside the industry, departures of this magnitude are never spontaneous. Contracts expire. Negotiations stretch. Calculations are made, about ratings, relevance, and risk. Sources close to the situation describe a quiet recalibration within Fox, a move to modernize its image, reach younger demographics, and escape the shadow of its older icons. For Hannity, who has always thrived on direct, one-on-one communication, the network's pivot toward panel-style discussions, faster formats, and algorithmic engagement may have felt like an erosion of his foundational power, intimacy. He was, above all, a conversationalist, not a clip generator. So perhaps this departure isn't an explosion, but an evolution, the inevitable moment when an old model finally gives way to a new architecture of influence. A reminder that even legends in media are, ultimately, temporary. 4. Audience reaction, a mirror of America itself. The reaction online was immediate, emotional, and divided. To millions, it felt personal, as though a friend had quietly walked out of the room without saying goodbye. For others, it was overdue, a changing of the guard in a media landscape long overdue for fresh voices. But the real story isn't the applause or the outrage, it's what the reaction reveals about America itself, because Hannity's audience wasn't merely a demographic. It was a community, bound by shared frustration, shared hope, and a sense of being heard in a world that often felt dismissive. In that sense, his show functioned as something larger than news. It was emotional infrastructure, and that's the part that can't easily be replaced. You can hire new anchors, redesign sets, and revamp slogans, but rebuilding trust? That takes generations. His viewers didn't just tune in for analysis, they tuned in for affirmation, and when affirmation disappears, fragmentation begins. 5. The fragmented future of media. The media world Hannity entered decades ago no longer exists. Back then, power was measured in Nielsen points, not algorithmic reach. Viewers had fewer choices and clearer tribes. Now, the audience he once unified across television is scattered across streaming platforms, podcasts, and niche online echo chambers. Ironically, Hannity himself helped build the very dynamic that now challenges traditional networks, a system where audiences follow personalities, not platforms. So his next chapter may not be on television at all. Industry observers already whisper of podcast networks, subscription-based streaming, and direct-to-fan video portals, where his voice could reach millions without corporate filters or time constraints, and if history is any guide, his audience will follow. Because in the 21st century, loyalty doesn't belong to channels. It belongs to voices. 6. The business reverberations. From a corporate perspective, this departure is seismic. Hannity's show wasn't just a ratings powerhouse, it was a cornerstone of advertiser stability. His demographic commanded consistent viewership and reliable engagement, particularly among audiences over 45, a segment that remains cable news's financial spine. In the short term, Fox faces two challenges: retaining advertisers who valued Hannity's predictability, and filling the programming void with a successor capable of holding similar numbers. But the deeper impact is symbolic: the loss of the last unbroken thread to the network's original identity. Fox's brand has always been personality-driven, and with Hannity gone, it confronts a paradox: how to reinvent itself without erasing the foundation that made it dominant. This isn't just a business challenge. It's a crisis of continuity. 7. The political implications. Beyond business, Hannity's exit disrupts a political ecosystem long accustomed to his influence. For 2 decades, he wasn't merely a commentator, he was a megaphone. A nightly amplifier of talking points that shaped party strategy and public perception. Political figures relied on his platform not just to communicate, but to connect, to translate policy into emotion, and ideology into identity. Without him, that communication pipeline fractures. In an election cycle increasingly defined by online virality and digital micro-targeting, the absence of a consistent broadcast figure leaves a vacuum that no algorithm can fully replace. The question becomes, who fills that void? Some believe the future lies in distributed influence, dozens of smaller voices across social media rather than one dominant broadcaster. If that's true, Hannity's exit may mark not just the end of a career, but the end of centralized conservative media as we knew it. 8. The human factor: what we forget about legends. Amid all the speculation, the ratings charts, the political ripples, the succession gossip, it's easy to forget there's a person at the center of all this. Behind the polished delivery and nightly debates was a man who lived nearly half his life under the pressure of public scrutiny. Every night, for over 20 years, he carried the weight of expectation, from viewers, executives, politicians, and critics alike. Every slip of the tongue, every controversial take, became a headline. Every opinion became an identity. So perhaps stepping away isn't defeat. Perhaps it's relief, a chance to exhale after decades of being a lightning rod for a divided nation. And if there's one thing television rarely allows its stars, it's silence. But sometimes, silence is the most eloquent statement of all. 9. The search for successor. Within Fox's headquarters, discussions are already underway about who might fill the slot. Will it be a younger host who can bridge the gap between traditional television and digital streaming audiences? Or will the network double down on established names to preserve continuity and reassure longtime viewers? Each option carries risk. A younger host may energize new viewers but alienate loyal ones. A veteran may preserve legacy but struggle to capture modern attention spans. Whoever steps into that seat won't simply inherit a show. They'll inherit a symbol, and the expectation to anchor an identity millions have internalized for decades, and that, more than ratings or revenue, will determine whether Fox can survive this transformation intact. 10. A moment of reckoning for traditional media. At a broader level, Hannity's departure underscores an uncomfortable truth: traditional media, as we've known it, is dissolving. Viewers no longer seek authority from networks, they seek relatability from individuals. The old hierarchy of broadcasters and audiences has flattened into a vast, decentralized web of personal brands, each competing for attention in an endless scroll. For the giants of cable news, that's both a threat and an opportunity. They can adapt, leveraging their credibility to shape new digital spaces, or they can fade, trapped in the nostalgia of their own success. Hannity's exit, in that light, becomes more than a personnel change. It becomes prophecy. 11. Legacy and the weight of impact. Regardless of where one stands politically, few can deny the scale of Hannity's impact on American discourse. That he didn't just comment on events, he helped create them. His show became a stage where national narratives were rehearsed and reinforced. Love him or loathe him, his voice defined an era of conviction-based journalism, where persuasion often mattered more than neutrality. For his supporters, he gave articulation to sentiments others mocked or ignored. For his detractors, he symbolized the blurring of line between journalism and activism. Either way, his influence is undeniable. You cannot tell the story of modern American media without his name on the timeline. And perhaps that's the truest measure of legacy, not universal admiration, but indelible presence. 12. What comes next? So, what happens now? Fox will rebuild, as it always has. New personalities will rise. Ratings will fluctuate. And audiences will migrate, seeking familiar voices in unfamiliar spaces, but the greater transformation will unfold quietly, in the living rooms, the podcasts, the live streams, where millions reevaluate whom they trust and why. Maybe Hannity will return on his own terms, through an independent platform where his voice is free from corporate filters. Maybe he'll take time away, choosing reflection over rhetoric. Or maybe his exit will signal something bigger, the beginning of a generational shift from centralized media to 1,000 smaller lights scattered across the digital horizon. Whatever the outcome, this much is certain: his departure will be studied as a case of how power in media moves, not in explosions, but in slow, tectonic slides that reshape the landscape forever. 13. The closing reflection. When the lights go out in a familiar studio, it's easy to think the story has ended, but in truth, every ending in media is only a pause, a moment of silence before the next signal emerges. Sean Hannity's departure is not merely about one man leaving a network. That it's about the transformation of how truth, ideology, and identity travel in the modern world. That it's about what happens when a voice that once unified millions finally steps back, leaving behind not just airtime, but a void in the collective rhythm of national conversation. And in that silence, new voices are already warming up. The camera may turn off, the studio may go dark, but the conversation never ends, because in the end, the story of media is not the story of who's on screen. It's the story of us, the audience, and how we choose who to listen to next.